Good afternoon and welcome to the Colorado Health Foundation's Creating Healthy Schools webinar. My name is Amy Strajewski and I'm the Communications Associate here at the Foundation as well as your chairperson for today's webinar. Let's go ahead and get started with some housekeeping notes. Our webinar today is being recorded so that others who could not attend can watch the presentation later. Tomorrow you will receive a link to this recording as well as the PDF presentation that we will go over today. We'll also post the recording and the presentation on our website at www.coloradohealth.org. In order to minimize background noise, your phones will be muted in a listen-only mode during the presentation. The final portion of our webinar is devoted to questions, so please feel free to send your questions via the chat function at any time during the presentation. You should see a chat dialog area located on the lower left-hand side of your screen where you may type and send questions. You will also see a raise hand button, which we will not be using, so you don't need to click it when asking a question. If you have any technical difficulties during the webinar, please call ReadyTalk's toll-free technical support number at 1-800-843-9166. Make sure to have your registration confirmation available. Finally, after the webinar has concluded, you will have the opportunity to give us feedback through a short survey. We ask you to take a minute and complete the survey, which helps us to improve our future presentations. And with that, I'll turn the conference over to Tiffany Perrin, Program Officer for Healthy Living, and Mary Beth Goodwin, Grants Manager at the Colorado Health Foundation.
Great. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm excited to be talking to you today. I'm guessing that for many of you, I should actually be saying it's good to be talking to you again, as I know I've talked with lots of you and a number of you joined the webinar last month and all of that. So thank you so much for taking the time today. And I imagine a number of you are joining us over lunch, so thanks for that. So on the last webinar, we focused on the funding opportunities broadly, where they came from, what we're hoping to partner with you on, and that sort of thing. Today we're going to focus primarily on the application, so how you access it, what information we're looking for, where to put it, and all of those sorts of things. We know that applications can be daunting and as much as possible we really want to demystify ours for you, so hopefully this will be helpful. But before I get to that, I did want to take a minute to do just a quick overview of the funding opportunities. I know that not everyone got to join last month, or you just haven't had a chance to dig in because the holidays and all that jazz. So I'm going to spend a few minutes on the overview, and for the rest of you that have already read into it and are up to speed, go ahead and check your Facebook for a minute or two. So the Creating Healthy Schools funding opportunities came out of a pretty extensive stakeholder engagement process in conjunction with the broader Healthy Schools collective impact effort that many of you are involved in or at very least are aware of. So that was an imperfect process, to be sure. We're continually improving. But hopefully with these funding opportunities you see some changes that really resonate with you and reflect the needs in your communities, and hopefully you will continue to improve, help us improve and refine going forward. So there are 3 funding opportunities within the Creating Healthy Schools approach that we're talking about: local planning and assessment, local implementation, and statewide systems building. Today we're going to talk pretty exclusively about the local funding ops. But it's important to know that those are available, the systems-wide as well, and that we envision all of these pieces working together, and it's really important to leverage the unique expertise that comes from each to ensure healthy schools in a consistent, sustainable way. We know, and a lot of the feedback we got from the stakeholder engagement process was the sense that we really need to get money directly to districts, that the folks that are on the ground doing the work have a lot of expertise and can deploy resources in a really good way, but it's also important to support infrastructure at the systems level. So you'll see both of those. So the distinction between a planning and an implementation grant really hinges on, and I'm going to do air quotes here even though you guys can't see it, comprehensive school health and wellness plan. If you have one, awesome. Let's talk about an implementation grant. If you're wanting to develop one or maybe revamp one that you already have, that's awesome too. Let's talk about a planning grant. So 2 of the most commonly asked questions are, what is a comprehensive school health and wellness plan? And what if I'm in the middle? What if I'm not really planning, but I'm not really implementation. So in terms of the terminology, you can't Google it and find it. Like, this is just just a combination of words we kind of landed on to talk about the work. So there's no template, there's no copyrighted thing out there, all of that. We anticipate that the plans are going to look different across the districts, and that's fine. Basically what we're doing is asking you to take a careful look at what you have in place or are proposing to develop and ask yourself questions like, does the plan address school health broadly, consistent with the whole school, whole child, whole community framework? Does the plan address equity? Do we have leadership buy-in and support? Was the plan informed by district data and best practices? And then really importantly, does it feel like it's understood to be the plan? In other words, is this a plan that only those who are involved with drafting it really know about, or is it seen as kind of a guiding go-to framework for healthy schools work in the district? So I think kind of reflecting on those questions will give us a good sense for where we are. In terms of being in the middle, kind of you've done some planning, maybe you're already doing a little bit of implementation as well. That's totally fine. We know that some of you are there and we want to support that work. So a reasonable portion of a planning grant can go to sustaining existing healthy eating and comprehensive physical activity efforts. We don't want to see those things go away, but before we can support expansion of them, we'd like to see that plan in place. So in the interest of time, I'm not going to talk about these slides that you see here, but we did want you to have them after the fact to refer to, and perhaps as we go through Q&A, I'll jump back to what the proposals have to focus on and what they should include. So now for the really fun stuff. My colleague Mary Beth Goodwin is here to walk us through the application. As Annie said, she's our grants manager, and she's absolutely fabulous. We thought that screen sharing would probably be the most helpful way to show you where to go, what to click on, and all of that. Unfortunately, one thing that we know is that with screen sharing, there might be a little bit of lag time. So thank you in advance for bearing with us. It might feel like a badly dubbed movie at a few points, but thank you for that. So Mary Beth, take it away.
Hi everyone. Thanks for being on the call today. We really appreciate your time. I'm going to lead you through how to access the actual application on our website, and then the actual application itself, and then how to access it once you're working on it. Just 1 minute. Hold on. I'm sorry for the technical difficulty. All right. Okay. Thanks for your patience there. Okay, so the first step in accessing your application, actually starting your application, is to go to our website at coloradohealth.org, which is what you'll see here. And then you'll see grant making and how to apply. And as Tiffany was mentioning, of course, the Healthy School funding opportunities are within our Healthy Living funding strategy right now. So you would click on Healthy Living. And then you'll see Creating Healthy Schools right here at the top. So this is where you'll want to click through to this guy. And then you'll see an overview of what Tiffany has been talking about so far, which is the local planning and assessment, local implementation, and statewide systems building. Again, for today's purposes, we're focusing on the local planning and implementation. And for today, we'll just go through the local planning and assessment as an exercise here to show you how to access your application. So for each of those funding pages, you'll see criteria and information about the funding opportunity, and you'll scroll all the way down to the bottom. And you'll see two buttons here, Start Online Application and Access Your Application. So of course, when you're first starting, you're going to click on Start Online Application. And this will take you to the first screen of our application. So for your tax ID, for nonprofits, of course, this is your tax exempt number. And then for local or public entities such as a school district, you can just put in 0. So for today's purposes, we're just going to put in 0. Don't be scared by the red writing there. You can just continue to click through. And then you'll see our actual application. Now the one piece of advice I do have for you is to once you get into the application portal, I would recommend scrolling to the very bottom of this first section and saving and finishing later. What this does is that it saves the actual application to your account. So if and when you sign back in again, you'll see it saved, and so all of your previous work will be saved. So I'm going to sign in as myself here. If you are a new applicant and you've never applied with us before, or maybe you're a new person at your organization that's applying on behalf of your organization, this is when you would actually set up an account first by clicking the new applicant, and it will lead you through some prompts to set up for your account. But because I have an existing account, I put in my email and my password. I log in, and I'm back to the application. So now you have your application saved to your account. So you can save and finish later and continue working on it when you can. So I'm just going to briefly go through the different sections of the application and have a quick commercial for Tiffany to talk more a little bit about the proposal narrative that we're looking for. But pretty standard sections here. So we have the organization information. So this is essentially your contact information. With the contact information, we have specifically who will be our primary point of contact moving forward. So all very straightforward. No trick questions included in there. If you're using a fiscal sponsor, which I know some of you are, and we've talked to some folks already, this would be where your fiscal sponsorship information goes. And so this would be the contact information for that organization. You'll move through to proposal information. And so this is where you'll enter a project title, proposal summary, just a 1 to 2 sentence description of your proposal. And you'll move through some basic questions like how much are you requesting, for how long, your total project budget, and then the geographic area that you serve, and the age group. So this proposal narrative, section 5, is really the meat of the application. So I'm actually going to turn it over to Tiffany, who can talk a little bit more about what we're looking for specifically in this section.
What? I thought you were going to do it. No, I'm kidding. Did you want to talk about the printer-friendly version button up there right now, or you want to talk about that later? Later. We'll talk about that later. Okay. So thank you, Mary Beth. I'm going to talk about the proposal narrative section, which I imagine is where most of your questions are, but perhaps I will be surprised. So a little context, please know that the application is not your only opportunity to talk about the work. It's really the beginning of a conversation. These aren't competitive grants as others have been, so absent any disqualifying criteria, it's reasonable to assume that we're going to be moving forward with site visits and or phone conversations or something like that to learn more. And then related to that, you'll see that we asked that you try to limit the proposed activity section to about 1,000 words. I promise you that your application will not get trashed if it's 1,001 words. We don't want you to spend time trying to cut words or rephrase things to hit that word count limit. Believe me, I've been there. But at the same time, we are anticipating a lot of applications. Yay. So selfishly, having kind of concise applications is appreciated. But again, it won't impact you either way. What we're looking for here in this section is an understanding of what you're going to do and how you're going to do it. We've noted a few key things that we'd like you to touch on or demonstrate. So let me kind of tick through those. Again, what are you going to do and how are you going to do it? Stakeholder engagement, including students, families, teachers, and other relevant stakeholders. Hopefully you've picked up on through conversations or just looking at these funding opportunities that we really are prioritizing equity, and engaging and understanding the community is a big part of that, so we want to see that reflected. Evidence of leadership, support, and engagement. So this is probably going to look very different across districts, and that's totally fine. Perhaps you're a really large district and you get a letter of support from the superintendent. That's great. Or if you're much smaller, maybe the superintendent is in a position to really roll up his or her sleeves and be part of the conversation. That's great. Anything in between is good too. Use of relevant district and community data. So we want to understand why the work you're proposing makes sense based on your community. What are the demographic realities? What does the data kind of tell you about the strengths and challenges and why you're proposing particular work? Inclusion of evidence-informed, culturally relevant best practices. So we definitely don't need a lit review here or peer-reviewed journals or anything like that. But we do want to get a sense from you for why you think a particular area of work or approach is likely to be effective in your district with the folks that you're working with. Use of differentiated strategies based on different needs. So again, equity. I think we all know, whether it be through our work or from the kiddos in our own lives, that no one size fits all. Don't we wish they came with instruction manuals? So that's what we want to see reflected there. Alignment of district offices, funding streams, and practices in support of the proposed work. So in spite of best intentions, we all know that things can get out of whack over time, whether that be due to a random grant requirement or leadership decisions that kind of persist or whatever. But we do want to hear how you have or will address those things and bring them into alignment over the course of the work. And then we also want you to address the population served by the proposed work. So that might come up in the data as you talk about data, but really getting at kind of the number that you anticipate will be impacted would be helpful. Any risks you see with the work as it moves forward. And those are kind of the things we want to hear about. I know it's a lot of information, but again, this application is not your only opportunity to talk about the work. So don't feel like you have to exhaustively address each one in the application. But please do anticipate that if things move forward with the grant, these are the kinds of conversations we're going to want to have moving forward. So before I turn it back to Mary Beth, you want to jump down to that interest in, So interest in systems level supports. This is really a help us help you section, kind of help us help you kind of question. This isn't going to impact your eligibility for funding in any way, but it's going to be really helpful in ensuring that there's adequate capacity among those system level grantees that I referenced before to partner with and support the local level grantees. So anything you put in there isn't going to obligate you to do any of that work, and frankly it doesn't guarantee that on our end we'll be able to support all of it, but we do just want to kind of have those conversations and get those started about what you would need in terms of professional development or technical assistance or whatever. So if you could just jot down a few ideas there, that would be most appreciated. So I'm going to go ahead and hand it back to Mary Beth to walk through the last couple of tabs, and we will quickly be getting to Q&A.
Great. Thanks, Tiffany. So without further ado, the exciting part at the end of the application. So this is where you will be required to submit several different documents and attachments to your application before it can be considered by the Health Foundation. So you'll see a list here. I'm hoping relatively straightforward, but please do feel free to reach out to either Tiffany or myself if you have any questions about these, because I know in particular when you're using a fiscal sponsor it can get a little tricky on whose financials you should submit or whose annual operating budget. But for the most part we'll require a line item budget form, and you can click on that actual template here. A budget narrative, which includes just a brief explanation of each item that you're requesting from the line item budget. A list of your board of directors, a brief description of your key staff, your organization's annual operating budget and current financials, and then your most recent audit if available. And again, if using a fiscal sponsor, we do require a memorandum of understanding between the fiscal sponsor and the organization or organizations, and I know some of your cases, and an audit. So you'll also have an opportunity here, if you'd like and if available, to upload your health and wellness plan if that's available, but again not required to submit your application. So after you have uploaded all those attachments, you will be able to review your application in Section 7. So this will give you your entire application from all 6 sections and what you've answered, to make sure and double check that that's how you would like to be presented. And as Tiffany mentioned earlier, there is a printer-friendly version up here to the top right that you're more than welcome to use if that's easier for you. And there's also an email draft option. So if there are people that you would like to email the draft of the application to, feel free to do that as well. So that covers the attachments, and just a few reminders very quickly if you don't mind. If you started your application and you need to save and come back and finish later, you can click on that second green arrow that was there right next to the Start Application button that says Access Your Application. So that's when you're going to want to sign in with your login information, then access it from there. Just a note to remember to save your work often and have a Word document separate from actually what you're inputting into the application portal. So in the event that there's some weird technical glitch, you don't lose any of your good work. And every time you do save your application, sorry if this is annoying, but you will receive an email confirmation from the Colorado Health Foundation that says, thank you for saving your application. Here's a copy of what you've done. So there will be several email reminders, and if you're not getting those, please do check your spam. So now I'm going to hand it back over to Tiffany, who's going to provide just a bit more information before we jump into some Q&A.
Alrighty, thank you. Are you able to? Awesome. Look, sharing and everything's moving forward. It's done. Okay. So this is another situation where I'm not going to talk through these slides, but just wanted you guys to have them for reference after today, and if coming up in the Q&A if we need to click back to them. But you can refer to this to see basically what I just talked about, as well as it's on our website as well. So the proposal narrative, the required documents, a little evaluation if you're feeling really geeky. And now I think I'm going to turn it to Annie to jump into the Q&A.
Great. Thanks, Tiffany and Mary Beth. So we will go ahead and start the question and answer portion of the webinar. As a quick reminder, our focus today is on answering questions about the application process. So if you have any questions that are very specific to your application or your district, please contact Tiffany directly and she'll be happy to speak with you one-on-one. So jumping right in, our first question is, if our school district has a tax-exempt number, should we enter that or just enter 0?
Nicole, thanks for your question. In your case, you can just enter your tax-exempt number.
Great. And the next one is, does the application need to address all the areas of comprehensive school health, or could an application focus on one area but as a comprehensive statewide systems building effort?
So I think there may be a couple of questions there. I think so today's webinar is really focused on the local funding opportunities, the local planning and assessment or local implementation. The efforts around the statewide systems building are kind of happening alongside. So if you have specific questions about that, please reach out to me. In terms of if we're talking about a local plan, we are asking that the plan at the very least does acknowledge and address all of those areas. That said, recognizing that the Health Foundation's implementation funding is only going to go to healthy eating and comprehensive physical activity. Certainly we wouldn't be funding all of those areas, but we do want to see the underlying plan address them with the hopes that you will be getting additional funding from other sources to support it on a broad-based scale.
Great. And to follow up on that, in proposal narrative, would you like us to highlight what we have done in the past to highlight each bullet, or just focus on the plan moving forward?
Oh, that's a good question. Whatever you feel like kind of paints the picture. Like I said, I think that this is the beginning of a conversation. I anticipate that beyond the application I'll be talking, or someone from here will be talking with most of you. So if you want to put it all into the application so we kind of have that background coming into conversations, that's great. If that feels like a whole lot of work and is potentially going over the 1,000 words or whatever, just go ahead and let's plan to have those conversations as part of site visits or phone calls. So really whatever you need to paint the picture, we're open to hearing. So.
Great. And do you have to be a school district only to apply?
So we are looking for district-wide efforts. So for traditional schools, we wouldn't fund just a singular school. We are open to groups of charters, and there's some details on the website about what those look like, whether it be grouped together under a charter management organization or something like that. But for the traditional schools, we'd be looking for district-wide efforts.
Great, and we've had a couple of questions about partnership. Will we be able to support letters of partnership?
This is Mary Beth. Thanks for that question. We do obviously love to see that there's support from multiple organizations. Definitely not required, but in that attachment section of the application, you'll be able to, in the drop-down of the options for uploading documents, you'll see Funding Opportunity Additional Attachment. And so if you would like to submit to us some letters of support that you have, you can use that option to upload as many letters as you'd like, within reason.
Great, and to follow up on that, if working in a partnership, can the lead of the partnership supply a partner's H&W plan?
Can the partner supply the health and wellness plan? I think it's going to be a case-by-case basis. We've heard from some areas that for whatever reason it might make sense to have the public health agency or something like that be the actual applicant. I think that regardless of who applies or who writes the application or what have you, that plan would be collaboratively developed. So I guess I'm less concerned about ownership and more concerned about seeing that level of involvement. So hopefully that answers the question, but just type more details if it did not.
Great, and the next question is, if we are using a collective impact framework for school health in our district and have a number of partner organizations involved in the application, should the application come from the backbone agency or the coalition?
Probably one of my most common refrains in all of this is, you tell us. And I don't mean that to be difficult, but really we're wanting to honor and support the structures that you all have in place and not have you jump through hoops that we're setting up because it makes sense to us. If the backbone makes sense, fine. If it's the district or somebody else, that's fine too. As I had said, we did hear a lot of stakeholder feedback that it's important to get money directly in the hands of districts to do this work. So I think we'd like to honor that, and if you are going to be proposing somebody other than that to be the recipient, then we'll probably just want to talk about that. But there's no opposition to that, if that makes sense.
And this is Mary Beth. If I could just add to that, in addition to what Tiffany said, I would also think about which of the two organizations would be the best suit to manage the funds long term, just because with grant agreements and all of that jazz that goes with grant administration, who will be reporting on the funds, who will be managing the funds, monitoring them and be able to report back. So that might help you choose between the two if needed.
Great, and getting into a little bit more of the details, where do we find information on the amount of money that we can apply for?
Well, you call or email Tiffany. We're trying to strike this balance of, as you might imagine, because we are open to virtually all districts, I think all districts, but we're scaling the grant size according to level of need as defined by free and reduced price lunch and or majority minority enrollment, as well as the district size. We're talking about really significantly different grant sizes. And selfishly, I don't want you guys to kill me if I give you a number and then through negotiations and all of that it becomes a little bit less or yay, a little bit more. So I'd really like to have those conversations one-on-one because I do appreciate the need to have kind of a ballpark to aim for, but hopefully you can kind of appreciate where we stand as well. The other thing I'll say is regardless of if we have those conversations and I say 100,000 over 2 years or something like that, please ask for what you need with the understanding and the expectation that there will probably be some measure of negotiation. That's usually how these things work. And even if we can't meet exactly what you need now, it's helpful for our process to have an understanding of what's needed to do the work so that we can build that into budgeting going forward.
Great, thank you. And diving into the application a little bit more, can you talk a little more about how to answer or address differentiated strategies? Is that in terms of planning or implementing?
Probably both. I think that you might have really clear ideas if you're in a place of implementing activities about what that might look like. If you're at a planning place and haven't really engaged in this work in a robust way before, then I think it's perfectly fine to kind of articulate your commitment to that, some of the technical assistance or resources you might draw on to inform your thinking about being responsive, but basically the commitment and both in terms of kind of values and all of that, but also resources to take on the issue of meeting the needs of kids across your district.
Great, thanks. Our next question is, how many key staff members are you looking to see listed?
Well, I don't know. How many do you need? I don't have a particular position on that. We don't have any limits or requirements from Mary Beth's side of the house. So tell us who it is.
And if we are working closely with the school district but they don't want to be the lead organizer, can the nonprofit be the lead and submit the application and be the main contact and responsibility of the grant?
Sure. That's fine. Again, like I was saying in response to another question, I think that we kind of have the expectation going in that the dollars would go directly to districts. It's fine if not. We certainly understand that there's reasons where that might make sense for it to go to a local partner, but we'd probably just want to have that discussion about why not the district.
Perfect. And getting a little bit more into the application, so I think this is probably for Mary Beth. For financial reports, can we just include website link audits on district websites?
That's a great question. So I think my colleague, Sarah Hughes, who I know many of you have been in contact with, she may kill me for saying this, but yes, you may do that because we understand that district financials can be quite large. So do feel free to just provide your link.
Great. And for the type of support, Section 4, Question 3, do we select the drop-down that best suits our needs, general operating, project support, capacity building, capital?
That's also a great question. I think for this in particular, if you would select project support, I think that would be the most appropriate for this funding op, even though I'm sure there's definitely general operating and capacity building and potentially some capital in there. But for these purposes, why don't you select project support, and then we can kind of recategorize them if needed along the way.
Great. Another question from Christy. For age group, the last question, Section 4, is it okay to select all ages if the proposal serves school-age children, staff, parents, and community?
Yes, I think so. That's great.
Perfect. And the next question is, there was no mention of the method for measuring results section of the proposal narrative. Is it safe to assume we will need to complete this section as well?
Yeah, and I was busily searching on my phone to see what our evaluation department has told us on that point, and I'm not able to pull it up right now. Basically, in terms of evaluation, we see that as really critical to this work and kind of tied up with the broader Healthy Schools Collective Impact work. We are trying to align there. We are strongly encouraging folks to participate in the Healthy Kids Colorado survey as well as SmartSource. We see the kind of evaluation and data requirements associated with this grant as being, we're hoping those will be relatively minimal, low lift for you all. In terms of the measurable results, if you have a question about that or want more information on that, I don't know if they can just chat us and let us know, and we can either send out an email after this to give you really clear guidance, or I can put our evaluation colleagues in contact with you guys about that.
And just of note, really quick, for the measurable results section, and as well as there was an organization information section that we did not, just in the interest of time, go over today in the proposal narrative. Those are required fields to be able to submit your application. So we're hoping that you have some things to say about both, but they will need to be they'll have to have some kind of information in there to be able to successfully submit.
Great, and a couple more questions I think for Tiffany. The first one is, what would be some potential risks that may be associated with this grant?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's case by case, so you'll have a sense for your district. Maybe you've got some sort of tentative leadership support, but it's a little bit precarious, and maybe they have a particular point of view on it. And so if that went away, perhaps that would limit the work's ability to go forward. Maybe you have limited resources to draw on beyond this grant. Any of those sorts of things that you think might compromise the ability to kind of achieve the outcomes. And don't worry, I mean, the reality is risks are out there. We'd be fooling ourselves if we thought, oh no, this is absolutely going to go 100% according to plan. But it's good to just kind of have a sense for that up front. And sometimes, especially in thinking about what sort of support might be available at the systems level in terms of technical assistance or something like that, or connections that we can make between grantees. So maybe we know you're dealing with a challenge in a particular district that somebody a year ago dealt with in another corner of the state, and we can make those connections. So that's what I would say about risks.
Great. The next question is, how will Wednesday's convening impact this funding initiative?
Hopefully hugely. So the convening that's being referenced is the collaborative coordination meeting for the proposed systems level applicants. So Civic Canopy, in partnership with Spark Policy Institute, is convening all of those applicants. I think we're somewhere between 25 and 30 at this point that are going to come together and have a day-long meeting to talk about how they're going to work together and streamline things to provide kind of that infrastructure at the systems level around technical assistance, professional development, data and assessment, policy, communications, all these sorts of things. And over the course of grant negotiation, both with them as well as with the local applicants and grantees, we anticipate some measure of matchmaking to ensure that you all are informing the work that they're doing, that it's not disconnected and out of touch with the reality of work on the ground, and that they're able to provide the kind of support and have adequate capacity to get out and deploy their resources to all of you. So that meeting is happening on Wednesday. I don't know the mechanisms by which we'll kind of share that, but certainly anticipate hearing more about that over the coming month or two.
Great, thanks. The next question is, if we are applying for planning but desire implementation funds in the future, do we speak to this in the application?
It's up to you. I think that what I would say is that our board and the foundation are really committed to this work over time, and that's exciting in a lot of ways, and paves the way for, we might be talking about a planning grant right now, but hopefully over time we're talking about moving to implementation, and we can support those pieces. Obviously we're a foundation, so we always have to talk about the sustainability thing, so it may be not the same level of funding over several years, but certainly kind of commitment to supporting that work. So yes, I would anticipate that would be available to apply for. Whether or not you need to address it in your application is entirely up to you, but it would be good to have those conversations. If you do have a longer range plan, would love to hear about them.
Great, thanks. And we have 2 questions left. So just as a reminder, if you want to submit questions, use the chat dialog box on the lower left-hand portion of your screen. So this question is a little more specific. We are a 501c3 nonprofit organization. We have for 3 years addressed prescription drug abuse in the community, and of late have begun working with some public schools in the San Luis Valley. Is this work fitting with the Creating Healthy Schools project?
I appreciate the question, but let's talk about that offline just so I can hear a little bit more and answer you the correct way. Great.
One more question. So what are the best examples of plans that you would refer us to?
Oh geez, this is a hard one because it's like choosing your favorite child, right? Which I won't do. No, but I've talked with people about this. There are a lot of really great plans out there, or a lot of great work around getting to a plan that maybe hasn't materialized into a plan just yet. And so at this point we're staying away from kind of recommending any that are out there, just because everywhere is going to look different, and we don't want to kind of put you guys on a path to trying to fit into a particular mold. If there are conversations that you want to have about what might be helpful, or what organizations are currently providing technical assistance around that, and have had exposure to a number of different plans and efforts across the state, go ahead and reach out to me, and I can certainly put you in contact there. But know that there's not a set template, and that there's a lot of good resources out there.
Thanks, Tiffany. Next question is the funding term 24 months?
It is up to 24 months, yes. So for those of you who have been following along over the evolution of this fun funding opportunity and funding in general, we did move to have the planning grants to be up to 2 years as well. Initially they were only available for up to 1 year. So many thanks to those of you who kind of provided feedback about the challenges associated with that. So both the local planning and local implementation can be up to 2 years. You don't have to take that 2 years, but that is available.
And just to reiterate, for the planning grant, when is the due date?
It's February 15th, 2016. And we will have the local funding opportunities available for all of our deadlines, which are February 15th, June 15th, October 15th, and then rinse and repeat, so February, June, October, 2016 and 2017. We recognize that especially the June and October cycle, not ideal for the school calendar, but we did want to make that available for those of you who aren't able to do February.
Perfect, thank you. So at this point we don't have any additional questions, so that will conclude our question and answer period. Tiffany, do you have any final comments that you'd like to make?
Really? No other questions? This is the fun part. Ask us questions. No, as always, thank you guys so much for participating. It's really helpful to get your questions, and it's been really helpful over the course of this work to partner with a number of you and get your feedback, and hopefully shaping this to be better and more supportive of your work over time. So thanks, and I look forward to working with you all over the coming months.
Thanks, Tiffany. So as a reminder, tomorrow all participants will receive an email with a link to the webinar recording. Don't forget to complete the short survey that will be available on your screen after we end the webinar. Your feedback will help us to improve our future presentations. Thanks so much for joining us, and have a great day.